In this video, we're going to talk about a topic called complete the square, an important concept for quadratic functions. So let's talk about the purpose of the completing the square. Is to convert trinomial term into perfect square. Trinomial term is the standard form of the quadratic, and we're going to try to convert the standard form into something called vertex form, where the vertex form contains perfect square, which is x minus h squared. The concept is very simple, converting trinomial to perfect square. So let's look at our first example. Given y equal to x squared minus 6x plus 8, and I want you to complete the square for that term. In other words, convert that into vertex form. First thing we're going to do, we're going to try to calculate a term called b over 2. We are given a standard form, so y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're trying to calculate b over 2. So in our case, b will be 6. In our case, b will be negative 6. So it'll be negative 6 over 2 squared. I strongly recommend not squaring the value. If you want, you could simplify it inside of the parenthesis. So we could say this is equal to negative 3 squared. Now we're going to add and subtract this value in between your x term and the constant term. So it looks like this. Y equal to x squared minus 6x plus negative 3 squared minus negative 3 squared plus 8. So notice that that term we added and subtracted. And the reason we add and subtracted the value is because the first three terms will become your perfect square. This will turn into x squared minus 6x plus 9 minus 9 plus 8. And we could see that x squared minus 6x plus 9, that could be factored down to x minus 3 squared. And then we have negative 9 plus 8, which comes out to be x minus 3 squared minus 1. And here's your answer. Again, so let's just look back for a second. There's a value that I want you to focus on. That value is the number we calculated earlier, that negative 3. Remember, that's known as b over 2. And if you look at our perfect square, we have that value called negative 3. So the reason we calculated the value is because that's the value that's going to be turned into the perfect square. And if you keep that in mind, the process of completing a square will be much easier. Uh, let's look at example 2. Given that y equals to negative x squared minus 7x plus 2, once again, I want you to complete the square. One thing you have to make a note is one thing that you want to make a note is you want to have your a to be positive 1. So if you don't have positive 1, factor out the value if necessary, and then apply what we just talked about in example 2. So it seems like we have negative x squared, so that's negative 1. So we're going to take out negative 1 from the equation. So we have x squared plus 7x minus 2. And we're just going to factor, or now we're going to use complete the square only on the term called x squared plus 7x minus 2. And let's do that on the side here. So we're given x squared plus 7x minus 2. Again, RB in this case is 7. So again, the value that we want to calculate was b over 2 square. That's the value that we want to calculate. So that will be 7 over 2. So once again, we're going to add this value in between x and your constant. So x squared plus 7x plus 7 over 2 minus 7 over 2 minus 2. And we said the first three term is going to factor into perfect square. So that will be x plus 7 over 2 minus 49 over 4. And now we're going to convert the negative to the common denominator, which is negative 8 over 4. And we will have x plus 7 over 2 square minus 57 over 4. So this problem had a fraction, but we didn't have to do a lot of thinking because we knew the behavior of the perfect square. That 7 over 2 will be your perfect square. So now we know what x squared plus 7x minus 2 going to be. Let's go back and replace that. So we had y equal to negative 1 times x plus 7 over 2 square minus 57 over 4. Don't forget we have to distribute the negative 1. So your final answer will be y equal to negative x plus 7 over 2 square plus 57 over 4. Now let's look at example 3. Given that y equal to 3x squared minus 5x minus 7. Once again, I want you to complete the square. Again, in example 2, we talked about your a has to be positive 1. We have positive 3. So we're going to take out 3 from the equation. Again, taking out, in other words, factoring out means dividing it. So we have y equal to 3 times x squared minus 5 over 3 x minus 7. Again, we only have to take out 3 from the x's. You don't have to worry about the constant. Again, you could always distribute the 3 to see if you factor out 3 correctly. Hopefully, if you distribute in, it'll come back to the original equation. So once again, let's do it aside. So x squared minus 5 over 3x is the term that we want to complete the square. Again, just keep in mind, technically this is plus 0. So the value we want to calculate is negative 5 over 6. Again, keep in mind is b over 2. We have negative 5 over 3 over 2, which is the same thing as multiplying by 1/2. That's why you get negative 5 over 6. And again, we're going to add this value after the x. So we have x squared minus 5 over 3 x plus and minus the value we just calculated, which is negative 5 over 6. So now we add and subtract it. We know the first three term will become a perfect square. Again, in our case, it will be x minus 5 over 6 square minus 25 over 36. So now let's replace this back. We have y equal to 3 times x minus 5 over 6 square minus 25 over 36 minus 7. So let's distribute the 3 back in. So 3 times x minus 5 over 6 square minus 25 over 12. Again, I'm going to convert that to the common denominator. The common denominator will be 12. So that will be 84. And if you add them together, you should get 3 times x minus 5 over 6 square minus, as a numerator, you should get 109. Denominator should come out to be 12. And here's your answer to the question. Now let's summarize the complete the square. We say we're given the standard form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. Just keep in mind a must equal to 1. If not, don't forget to factor out that value to make it as 1. The first step is to calculate the value called b over 2 square. Second step is to add and subtract that value after the x term. Third step is factor the first 3 terms into the perfect square. And again, if you look carefully, that factoring term will be that number that we calculated. So again, that's the hint, and that will help us to process, and that will help us to solve and calculate complicated value like fractions and so on. And the last step will be to simplify the numbers that's remaining. And that's how you complete the square.